So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Allison Fisher. I've worked at the University of Regina now for, I don't know, 15 years or so. I wear multiple hats. I am the children's programs, intramural sport club, aquatics coordinator, along with some marketing and other things, other duties as assigned apparently. I have roped Jason into co-hosting with me because that's what I make him do all the time. So if he wants to introduce himself.
My name is Jason Wright. I work at the University of Victoria. I think there's a fair few of us who have met and some that haven't. Alison and I talked briefly about doing introductions and we're worried about running out of time. So if we split into breakout rooms, maybe we do it then, Alison, and we kind of do some smaller introductions.
Yeah.
This gives us a chance, but the whole purpose of today is to sort of build some of those connections. So in my experience, when we have these big group talks, you might hear one or two schools who are doing something similar to what you're interested in doing. And that's the opportunity for you to reach out to those groups and pursue them. There'll be lots of sort of different ways of getting things done. But it's really incumbent on us to reach out to the people who are pursuing a similar path and trying to get some of those conversations going. So we would encourage you, if you need to connect to someone else, to reach out to Alison or I, and we're happy to put people into contact if they're not already able to do so.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing about what we do is we have the ability, we're not in competition with each other. So we have the ability to reach out and ask questions and not start from scratch. I can't tell you how many schools I've borrowed information from to help build our sport club program. Chelsea Jones is a former student of mine and she helped build our club program from basically the ground up. We had a few things in place that weren't really working. And so her and I worked really closely on it. And so, yeah, so I have asked for feedback on what you guys want to cover, and I've gotten some great questions. So I'm going to fire out some. We're going to just start with some basic club management. How many people are new to sport clubs? How many, if you guys want to hang your hands? A couple of you. Okay. Awesome. So we'll go through some basic stuff. Please, please, please. The whole point of this is that it's not Jason and I talking. If you have ideas or things you're doing that you'd like to share, please jump in. Cut me off. I'm good with that. So just the first question is really basic club management. So how do you supervise your rec and competitive clubs? How do they fit into your department? Do you have a sole sport club person? Kind of how does that all work? So at the U of R, I am our club supervisor. So we only deal with competitive clubs, though we don't have rec.
Ryan, what do you guys do?
I just take care of the competitive clubs and we have someone separate for recreational clubs. Randy is rec clubs.
And I look after both rec and competitive. So at UVic, we have 30 groups, student-led, student-driven. Normally, I'd have one assistant that provides support, but this year after COVID, I don't even have that.
Yeah, I look after both at Mount Royal as well. It's pretty small right now. We've only got a couple of rec and one competitive right now. So
I'm with UBC. I just started about a month ago. So I'm the competitive sport club coordinator. We have 14 teams and we don't have rec sport clubs within the athletics and rec. We have a bunch through the AMS, but that's very separate from us. So
I can go. Okay, I can go for Wilfrid Laurier. So we have 23 sport clubs, recreational and competitive, both fall under my portfolio. I also cover aquatics and camps, so it's very busy.
I was just going to say, because I don't know how to change my title on my profile here, that I'm at Ryerson, for those that I don't know and who don't know me.
I'm Sterling Ivany. I'm with Georgian College in Barrie, Ontario. I emailed Alison about this. At the collegiate level or at the college level, we don't really have competitive clubs under the athletic department per se, but at my school, anything that's not a varsity related type thing goes through our student union, which is got a pretty loosey-goosey application process. And then what's been happening lately is if there's an issue, and since it quotes unquote is sports related, then they come to the athletic department to try to solve the issue or see if we can help. So I'm trying to, I don't know what I don't know. As I've also told Allison, anything that what would be equivalent for you guys for competitive clubs at a university level, we have a circuit of tournaments for what we call extramural teams. So I have a competitive ice hockey for men's and female, women and men, competitive indoor cricket. There's a circuit of events that's just between colleges that the college actually, for lack of, it comes out of rec funding. It's not funded separately. And that's been very successful over the last 25 years. So for somebody like me, we've got an equestrian team, we've got an esports club. That's kind of, whenever there's a problem, they see the word, it's a sport, so they come to the athletic department to try to solve the problem, but they haven't put the groundwork in place to do it properly to begin with. So that's why I'm here to try to figure that out, because it's becoming more and more prominent. So sorry to be long-winded,
No.
but that's a scoop for me.
I'm so glad you reached out, because I think that's one of the challenges too. Like, I work in recreation. I'm not an athletics person whatsoever, but I do now. They have changed our structure here that my club stuff does report up through athletics. And I think that's pretty unique. I don't know a lot of club programs, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think for the most part, those clubs that are competing are actually falling under their rec department. Does anybody report directly to athletics?
We are here at Lakehead, it's just one big department, but I technically coordinate rec, but then I report to the athletics director. So it's.
Yeah, and same for like rec is under athletics for us. It's athletics, recreation, fitness. It's all under one bailiwick, except these clubs kind of exist in the ether. And sometimes they're ours and sometimes they're not. And it's just a weird setup.
Sounds like they're not yours until they're a problem, then they're yours, Sterling.
You're exactly right, Jason.
Yeah, and we don't have competitive or recreational clubs. They're just called club sports, and that's their category name here.
Yeah, I think that's why like clubs are so different no matter your school. So our clubs actually have to register through our students union, but if they're competitive, and the way we define our clubs is that they have to be able to attend a university national championship. And if they can't, then we don't want any part of them. And we don't give them, they can have an hour free facility time a week. And we don't do, I mean, even to get that hour is pretty tight in our facilities because we are open to the community. So it's pretty challenging in that way. Does anybody else have any student union connections or deal with their student union on their clubs?
So here at UBC, yeah, I guess the competitive sport club, it's only been about the last 6 years, and similar to, I think many of you in the comments, like we have athletics and rec as one big department, but I do report like directly to the rec director, but we have a very like sort of stringent process to become a competitive sport club, and there's limited funding. So that's why we have the 14 teams, and we have so many clubs that are part of the student union, like the Alma Mater Society, who want to be competitive sport clubs, but we only do an intake every 2 to 3 years. So we're constantly having like emails and people making contact wanting to become a club, but it's quite a like complicated process with a lot of hoops to jump through. So it's been interesting for me trying to wade through that as I start here and try to understand the nuance with all the different clubs and how that works.
And on the opposite end of that, Stephanie, and ours, like someone wants to be the Georgian equestrian team, they first go out and compete as that, then they come to the student union and tell them that they're doing that. And then, oh, we should get them in the fold. And, oh, you've had a problem with team selection. I don't know anything about that. I'll call Sterling. And it's just a bit of a quagmire, especially with people wanting to use Instagram and TikTok to fight their battles. So it's just, it's really coming to a head for my school personally. So I'm certainly, again, as I was taught, even when I emailed Alison, I'm kind of the coordinator for extramural events for Ontario colleges. So it's for all the colleges, it's going to be an ongoing, I think it's going to be an emerging trend, even though we do have extramural sport, which kind of falls under, a rec funding model and all that. It's just, we just don't have a lot of institutional knowledge about it as colleges. So, and we fight the 2-year, most of our students are here for 2 years. So you kind of get them set up for a year and then they're gone in another year and there's no continuity. And it's a lot of that's falling on administrators to kind of be the foundation for continuance of that kind of stream.
Yeah, I don't know how you're doing it. Sorry to say.
Smile and wave. I do a lot of smile and waving.
Seems like a lot.
Anyway, enough about me. I'm happy to hear what everybody else. That's why I'm here. So thanks for bearing with me.
Yeah, no, of course. So what requirements do you guys have in place for rec and competitive clubs? Is it the same? So do you require constitution? Who is in charge of your team selection? Is that on the team? Is it on the coach? Is it on the department? Who creates your dispute resolution policies, your discipline policies, those kinds of things? And is it similar for recreation as competitive, or are those completely different?
Marty, what are you doing at U of A?
I knew you were going to ask me, Jason. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Marty. I'm at U of A now, just a month in. Prior to that, I was at UBCO for a couple of years, and then just over 7 years at MacEwan. It's very interesting to listen to everyone's story, and being a 3 institutional guy, I can relate to really all your stories, especially Sterling, when you resonated with me when you're talking about the continuity and the 2-year overlap of basically your job is perpetually trying to get executives 1 year after another, which is really challenging. At MacEwan, same way. Rather, although they have degrees now, the 2-year diploma is still pretty prominent there. Anyways, at U of A, 25 clubs, and they're all various tiers. I believe there's 5 tiers right now, but it's going under a revamp under my tenure. There's like instructional clubs, recreational clubs, competitive clubs, various levels of student engagement percentages, and coaching and national body PSO type requirements, depending on what the clubs are. Basically, we define our club sports here as traditional, non-traditional sport, and or those clubs who came from the student union type environment, but utilize our facilities. So, I mean, one of my clubs is like the Bollywood dance, and maybe somebody wouldn't really consider that a sport club, but dance is an aesthetic sport. We all study that somewhere down the line, but anyways, they used to be a student-based student union group club, but because they heavily use our facilities, they kind of come under our tenure. Esports is brand new as well too, and that's up and coming for those that have esports clubs. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. Nice to see you again, Allison.
You too. So at U of R, again, we don't have rec clubs, but we do require all of our teams to have a constitution. And it's actually been challenging this year. We've had a couple teams haven't participated in a couple years, and so they have funds sitting in an account, and we have to figure out what to do. And so their guidance in their constitution is not really clear. So we need to clarify some of that with our current clubs and work with them on that. And then basically we set all our policies. We are very unique, and I know that. We have a very large budget for our clubs. We are funded by the students. Sorry, this is going to depress everybody. Our students union collects $6 a semester for our club sport. We currently sit at about $160,000 annually that gets funded to our clubs. It's insane, and I recognize that, and I tell our clubs every day that you're very fortunate, and I never want to hear you complain, because you still have to fundraise and do all these things, but they're very fortunate. COVID was amazing to them. They had $160,000 that they got to figure out what to do with, and they created a scholarship and a travel fund, or a uniform fund, and a medical fund, and like they have money, right? So the great thing for me is I have a lot of rules. You don't follow my rules, you don't get money. The only bad thing for me is that because it's student union money, I have no say in how it's spent. And so they vote every year on how they spend this money. And students are not always the best stewards of finance. And some of their ideas are not great. So again, we've actually put in rules on, I know, we put in rules on what it can be spent on and what it can't be spent on, just to curb some of that as well. I guess that leads to, does anybody have a funding model? I know I'm unique and I totally get that. So that's why I hate starting off with like, I have all this money. What does everybody else do? When like some teams, some people have nothing. Some people have a small budget. They can give their teams a couple $100s. For me, it's easy to implement discipline policies and stuff because I can. Anybody can, but we have finances tied to their following all of our guidelines.
It's very similar to U of A, and I'm still trying to figure out their funding model here, still being pretty new, but they do have it's called the Campus Recreation Enhancement Fund, and they can apply for it and they can get thousands of dollars. So having that financial incentive to keep them in line is, I'm noticing, is a really positive, makes my job a little bit easier in this end, working at UBCO, and Taylor's my new replacement down there, but a little more challenging because they were 100% self-funded. So there was sometimes a little more challenging to keep them in line with the university policies and et cetera.
Can we do a show of hands? How many of us have access to student funds from the university or college that you're at? And how many of us have funding that comes internally from your department? And how many of us get no funding and are totally club self-funded? Okay. So again, it's like part of this challenge is always everybody does things differently. So when we think of trying to bring people together and have conversations, it's like when you have two totally separate models, it's really important if you see another school or hear an idea that resonates, make sure you like just connect with that person. We talked about discipline. Has anyone developed their own internal discipline policies for clubs, or do you follow athletics policies, or are you using institutional policies for discipline? Team X goes off campus, does something really stupid. They come back, you're told about it. Who follows up with that?
We have a sport club demerit system essentially. So the teams are responsible for reporting if anything goes wrong, and if they do, we go through a process and still give them demerits. If they don't tell us about it and then we find out, then they get in bigger trouble. So we're obviously following greater department-wide rules, but we do within our program have a very specific list of things and what happens if something happens.
So if there's an allegation against a student that's part of your program, is it handled internally, or do you go outside to HR or someone at UBC Vancouver to provide that level of support?
I think it would depend how serious it is and if it goes beyond the sport club program. Again, I'm very new, so I'm not totally sure yet. I definitely think if it's smaller scale problems, then I would probably just handle it perhaps with my director. But yes, I do think we have the support of the greater university if needed.
Does anyone handle discipline totally internally?
Hi, I'm Fetty. I'm the new sport clubs coordinator at Western, and yeah, we sort of just deal with it internally. We use the athletics code of conduct to sort of go by how to deal with some of the infractions that they might incur. And because most of our clubs are also operating out of the recreation center, then we have our own building policies, which we enforce, of course. And if something is in violation of either of those codes, then we typically just have a small committee, if it's something major, especially, so that we can discuss about the how to proceed with punishments or whatnot. And if the clubs want to appeal the decision, they can. So there's a bit of a process there as well. Since I've been in the role, and I just started full time about a month ago, but I was doing it part-time for Beth Emery, who I'm sure some of you might know. So in the time that I was doing this job, whether part-time or full-time, I don't think we've ever had any big sanctions like that. So really not much to report there though.
Yeah, for us right now, I think something like that, Jason, would be if on the general student code of conduct, but would be handled internally first, so within our department, but depending on the seriousness of the nature, it would then go up to a director or could go all the way to HR. We haven't had anything that serious yet, but and certainly for our extramural program, they're basically, I basically copied whatever the rules are for varsity athletes. The same rules apply to those athletes as well. So, and they're kind of told they're representing the school. If you're part of extramural ice hockey, you're representing the school 24/7. So be careful what you post on Instagram, and be careful if you're going out in Grizzlies gear and all that stuff. So it's on a very, on that very basic level. But yeah, right now it's just the general student code of conduct for the most part that governs things at George.
That's the same for us. So we have a non-academic misconduct policy that's run by the University of Victoria, and most of our club teams will sign something that sort of says this is a code of conduct expectation based on being a part of a sport club. But if something were to go wrong outside of, if they're off campus or it's not in our facilities, then we would go with the university's non-academic misconduct policy.
So we have our students sign the same athlete agreement that our varsity athletes sign. So it kind of covers everything. We have had a couple discipline issues. If it's just minor, I'll deal with it. The last one, it was our athletic director, myself, and I don't know her job title anymore. It's changed a couple times, but basically respect, our workplace respect person. Respectful workplace, that's her job title or something like that. And so she joined us just because the nature of the incident. And the three of us kind of met and made some decisions based on that. If necessary, it would go to our AVP of Student Affairs, same thing, that non-credit conduct policy that is in there. But I think our athlete agreement covers most of that as well.
Yeah, for us at Mount Royal, I'm very lucky. Chad has left me a club code of conduct. So we have a specific one for our club athletes that they sign at the beginning of each year.
And I'll maybe piggyback off that too. In my experience, trying to be obviously proactive during training and finding the right executives obviously make a big difference, but also connecting with our student equity officers or relations officers, whatever the department on campus is. I found they've been an incredible resource for us. And not that you want to hide behind their policies, but at the end of the day, they have a lot of really strong language and they've worked towards issues all the time. So I would say if you haven't already, I'm sure most of us have, proactively connect with them because they're an amazing resource to have in our back pocket. Because yeah, there's not a cookie cutter incident that comes up, and you don't want to be working through those yourself a lot of times too. So.
I can speak towards UBCO. So we have our own unique disciplinary policy that kind of is in line with the university as well as our athletic department. So our sport clubs are new as of 2-3 years ago. And so this year was our first year that we had an actual sport club coordinator and myself a sport club assistant. So I guess our biggest issue is putting these policies in place and then kind of having some older clubs who were formed before we were put into place, kind of trying to work within our new set of rules. So all of our stuff is all internal.
I feel like it's a good time for me to jump in here. I haven't introduced myself. I'm Zach, and I actually don't work for a university at all. I work for Fusion, and we are looking to create a club sports product that will tackle many of the needs that you guys are kind of talking about. I'm a big believer in you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth, and to use them proportionally. And so listening to all of your different perspectives and takes on how you manage club sports is super fascinating, interesting to me. And what we're trying to achieve here is that we create a prototype that takes care of money management, travel requests, roster management, waivers, such as the code of conduct that you guys are all talking about, uniqueness. It's all done electronically, but we're also looking to empower the student as well in terms of volunteer hours, fundraising, and certain things about communicating between officers and club admins, and streamlining the communication process so you don't get a million emails firing left, right, and center. It's all through one platform. I'm not here to sell you guys anything or really push an agenda, but I'm curious to listen to everything you guys are saying. And right now, we're currently doing an early adopter program integration. We're looking to co-create with specific club sports experts that allows us to not only develop side by side with experts, but how do you guys have a humongous influence? And just as this amazing meeting is going on and connecting and empowering each other through this powerful network, is build that network of club sports experts together to design something that's pretty amazing. If you feel uncomfortable of me listening to your conversation and hanging out here and getting intel, if any of you feel that way, I'll happily jump off. But if not, I'd love to stick around. And if anyone would like to see what we have for club sports, we can take it offline. I'd be happy to show you. Sorry to not answer any questions, but it's nice to meet you all.
Zach, we use Fusion. So what I've asked is that any other institutions that are here on the call that are using Fusion software, if you're interested, maybe put your name and your school and your email address in the chat, and Zach can pick those off and then reach out to a smaller group. If like, I'd love to get involved in a conversation around software that helps provide support. So it may not work for everyone because we have all sorts of different software that people are using, but there'll be a few Fusion users on this call for sure.
And yeah, it's amazing. Fusion's a great software product for sure. This Fusion Club Sports is a standalone. It's its own product. It's currently being developed right now, and we're in the design stage. We've done a ton of market research with club sports experts, and we've created this kind of early adopter program, which we're forming right now as we speak. And we've partnered with certain institutions that we kind of show them option A, B, C, D. Tell me which ones you like. Tell me which ones you hate. And we gain all this feedback. And as we're getting this feedback, we're coding side by side. So we're not developing with a blind eye or with intentions of what we think is important. We're really doing a consumer focus and building towards the needs of everyone here and the students, of course, involved. So it's kind of new. Anyway, I saw this NIRSA post and I couldn't resist. But yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling. I want to hear from you. So, and if you do want to connect, please drop in your info. I'll happily reach out.
There we go. Anyone who wants sort of to get in touch with Zach or to hear more about the product that they're talking about, just throw your name, institution, and email address in the chat and he can grab those.
So Zach, just to clarify, is it like Fusion IM in the sense that it's an additional module, or it's even separate from Fusion, just under that umbrella?
Right now, it's to be determined. It could go in with Fusion IM and integrate with Fusion, but at the same time, we don't want it to be solely related or solely linked to Fusion. There's lots of problems with Fusion IM that we're trying to not do with club sports, trying to make it better.
Thank you.
Awesome. That actually leads right into the next question. Does anybody have any software that they're currently using to help manage with clubs? I know we use Google Docs, and that's about as techy as we get right now.
Yeah, we use Fusion for pretty much all our services at the rec center here at Western, and because all our clubs are student funded or funded through membership fees for the club, then we just have all the memberships set up through Fusion, and that's how we collect their information. That's how they sign their waivers to actually be part of the club. And if they have any deposit, say if they're doing a fundraiser or doing any other event, like organizing a tournament internally or something like that, then that's how we use the system to also collect those fees. And other than that, I think that's pretty much all we use Fusion for. Yeah.
So we just brought in AIMS, which was developed at Queen's University to provide support to some of our varsity teams, and we'll be able to use that for our club program rolling out in the future. Part of the interesting piece of it is it gives each student athlete the opportunity to create their own profile within what the university has determined is required information. So the varsity profile takes athletes almost 2 hours to complete. And from a sport club athlete standpoint, we're trying to figure out how much of that information do we actually need and how much of it will they take the time to actually fill out. And then how do we apply it across a board that has competitive teams where we can basically force them to do it, to recreational groups where someone could join and then never show up again. So that'll be, I should have a better sense of that next year, but excited to at least have a platform where in theory you would be able to connect with every single person on a club or every single executive without having to go through the trouble of putting them in different systems, right? So you don't have to get it from a Google Doc or move it here. You just use this one platform to reach out to everyone who's actually expressed interest or created a profile.
Awesome. So the next question is anyone requiring safe sport training? Maybe Jason, do you want to explain what that is and kind of take on that?
So is everyone familiar with the concept of safe sport, or is it like, have you heard of it before? Not really. Okay, so basically coming out of some of the horrific stories that have come out of Olympic level sport and some challenges that have existed in sport around power dynamics, Sport Canada has created a safe sport module, which is training for coaches, it's training for athletes, it's training for admin, it's free, which is awesome. So if you look up safe sport, I can actually put a link in the profile when I'm done talking, but essentially you would create an account and then you would go in with your account, you select which of those categories fit what you're trying to do, and then you complete this training across Canada. And that the focus of the training is around those power dynamics and around understanding what type of activity, I'm going to date myself here, but what type of activity from coaching is acceptable or was deemed acceptable and what is no longer acceptable. So it's just, I can't think of a good example from the modern era, but if you think about a coach that you've had in your own past who taught you by breaking you down, right? The idea of we're all lumps of coal that under extreme pressure will be turned into diamonds is the old coaching philosophy. And what they neglect to mention is that those of us who don't turn into diamonds become coal dust, which is then just swept off the table. So Safe Sport is trying to address the challenges around protecting how an athlete feels and ensuring that the sport that they're participating in is a part of the bigger person, and the bigger person needs to be respected. I don't know that that's the best explanation, but I'll put the link in, and I'd be very curious to see from an admin perspective, if you were to take the training, do you find there's value in it? One of the things that I found in taking it myself is that it really highlights for a lot of our club activities, which are student-led, student-driven, or with volunteer coaches, where agendas are harder to necessarily know, and certainly your ability to oversee that many people and those numbers. Like we have 350 varsity athletes, I have 1,500 club athletes. So there's zero chance that we're going to be able to provide the same level of support to students that are struggling. And when you think about, you know, team selection policies, do students understand if we have a student coach that they're making decisions that could severely negatively impact another student's life, and they may never clue into that, right? So it starts to highlight some of the power dynamics that are there. It starts to get people thinking about what is and what is not okay behavior. And it also sets a good bar nationally. So it's not something your institution has to create. It's something we just need to adopt. Here at UVic, all varsity athletes have to take the training, so it's mandatory. I haven't had an opportunity to get breathing space to get that out, but we're going to start with all of our club leaders and all of our coaches. And then we're going to roll into, do we, for our competitive teams, require that all athletes participate and take the training? Or like, what do we do with rec sport? Do we force everyone to do it? In which case, again, zero chance that I would be able to manage who has and who hasn't. Or do you just try to apply pressure and hope that the more you get, the better? It's something you would only need to do once. So once you've completed the training, it would be there forever. Part of the process of AIMS is trying to figure out what are the categories of training we want to cover, because I have another one with the Outdoor Council of Canada that I'll get to later, where the expectation of a national standard or a set bar is rising on campus. So how do we provide that level of training to our students? I'm going to stop talking and put the link in the thing.
Sorry, Jason, I just had a quick question. What's the time commitment for that?
If I'm not mistaken, and I could easily be, it took me like 2 hours to complete it.
Okay.
So it isn't like, the beauty of it is you don't have to manage anything about it beyond doing it yourself to assess, is this something you think fits your program? And so that's a 2-hour commitment on your part. You then get a national certification in your coaching profile. So for those of us that are heavily involved in our own sport and may have coaching interests outside of that, or some of you might have kids that you're looking to coach, like the expectation across Canada is this program's only going to get bigger. So it may not have impacted us yet, but the push is going to come. And it's certainly already arrived at a varsity standpoint. Here at the University of Victoria, we've had some negative press around some coaching dynamics within some of our programs. And so that has exacerbated and quickened the pace in terms of adoption. So we're probably early adopters of this, which is more process. But when you actually do the training, you kind of think, some of this is super obvious, but isn't it nice to have the conversation?
Thanks, Jason. So I know some schools travel with COVID has been challenging for some schools. Our teams have been able to travel. Is anybody allowing their teams to travel into the US? And if so, what are you requiring from them? I know I'm going to be taking a group of students to Portland hopefully at the end of March. But are you allowing, and that's for intramurals, but is anybody allowing club teams to travel into the US? Are you allowed to travel outside of the province or outside your region? How's travel going right now?
So I'll start. Thank you for including this question, because I was really curious to see what everybody else is doing. Currently with UBC, we have people are not allowed to travel for sport across the border until Christmas, maybe like in January. We're thinking of allowing it, and I honestly think we will say yes, but it's not official yet. And I get this question repeatedly every week because most of our competitive sport club teams, their primary competition is in the US. So I think we're going to allow it. We are mandating the COVID included in travel insurance. And interestingly, for anybody, we're allowing them to travel outside of the province right now. So we've had teams go to Alberta and they've had to have the same travel insurance that includes COVID coverage. So that's been really interesting and massively increasing our costs for insurance. I think the thing that we were most concerned about was a lot of our teams will drive across the border for 2-3 days and come back. And we were worried about the COVID testing requirements. So I think the recent change with the 72 hours not requiring the test to come back, I think will make a huge difference to make it more viable, because I think we were in a position where we expected that we'd probably say it's allowed, but then logistically we weren't sure how it would really be possible. So those are kind of what's on our mind right now, but I'm curious if anyone else has additional considerations that maybe I haven't thought of about that cross-border travel.
Is anyone else trying to, any new noise from other schools where people are trying to get across the border?
I'll just jump in quick. The only club that we have that in the past has traveled to the US has been our equestrian club. But they've had 2 teams, I think, that traveled to the US, but this year we've said no. That was originally because we still didn't have that international travel. And then they decided not to have the clubs in general for the year. So, now it's not happening. We may end up getting rid of those teams anyway, so that they only compete in Canada, since it's the only club that travels. And because they're not part of varsity, our varsity programs still don't usually travel across the border anyway. So we're probably looking to get rid of that. But originally, it was just too much to consider and not worth just for the one club. But seeing Stephanie's, most of them, their leagues or whatnot, their competition is outside of Canada, then that makes more sense to them. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a bowling club, like a 10-pin bowling club that only can compete in the US because there's no other Canadian team that does it. And they were not allowed to compete last year and not allowed to compete this year. And that one, I'm interested in what you guys were doing there at UBC, because I think the pressure is going to come on to allow them to rejig again, because the way the program works is in Ontario, I guess in 5 or 10 pin bowling, kids bowling all the way up can get scholarship dollars to get access, so they can get their school paid for to come to college, which is why we have this program. So admin is missing out on 10 kids potentially that could be bowling, and dollars are scarce, as we all know. So I'm assuming that will get revisited sooner than later, but probably not for this year. It'll probably be a September thing, with fingers crossed, so to speak. And again, that creates challenges. Like you guys are talking about insurance and that. We've never even ever addressed that. Like, I don't know if it falls under athletics, if it falls under the school's insurance, if it's, and we've never had anything bad happen, right? So that scares me.
So for us, we are also, Stephanie, in the same boat, and maybe it's easier for us to have this conversation online or offline, sorry. But essentially, we've also mandated they're going to have to fill out yet another waiver. So I can share the waiver that we've developed. I put in the chat the International Travel Safety Standards, which is a 7-step process that all students are going to have to do. But for club sport, essentially what we're going to say to them is that you recognize that you're choosing to do this. You don't have to do this, and you're doing it of your own volition. So you're responsible for all of it by yourself. So in worst case scenario, we'll again look at, I'd love to know who you're buying insurance from. I think Curtis at SFU might be able to provide some information to us as well, just because they're going to have their varsity teams traveling. And I know for some of the groups that can do shorter border crossings, what SFU is doing is they're testing the athletes on campus 72 hours prior to their return, so that they get all of the testing done. They go to the US with their PCR tests completed, and they return within that 72-hour window. So they don't have to have the tests taken down there. The challenge, I think, for us is you're going to have ultimate teams and possibly some sailing groups and people who are going to stay longer than 72 hours, simply because we don't fly to our destinations, and it may not work out to be able to do it that way. But let's talk just the two of us. And then Sterling, if you want to join us, feel free.
Jason, you can take this next one.
Well, now you have to make me find the agenda. Okay.
Oh, it's the Outdoor Council of Canada Field Leader Program.
There we go. Okay, so I seem to be winning the policy lottery lately, where everything that I want to do, somebody says, hey, you need to jump through these extra 17 hoops. So 2 years ago, the University of Victoria had an academic trip that went up to Bamfield for research purposes. The bus was on a road that isn't the best, as many of our off-road years are, and it flipped over and 2 students passed away. So as a result of that, we did an inquiry into all things and came back with 44 recommendations to the university around travel. We had already been doing 99% of those in terms of our trip paperwork and the things that we had been requesting. The biggest change on our end was, what are the qualifications and certifications of the people leading these groups? Because peer-led off-campus travel didn't have a university employee attached to it. So Alison, you travel with most of your teams. How many others have to have a staff member travel with their teams? Nobody else. So the rest of you are sitting in my bus, which is real fun. So the university said, we need to develop a program that is going to show standardized certification on a national level or provincial level for all students participating. So we started off by looking at, okay, so if the kayaking club wants to do something, we'd go to Kayak BC. If the softball team wanted to do something, we'd go to Softball Canada or BC Softball. And what quickly became apparent is that for those areas that had coaching and or some sort of nationally or provincially recognized training, it was focused on skills, but there was no leadership component. So then we started trying to figure out, well, how would we manage working with those 30 different groups? And I would be the lucky person trying to build all those relationships, and it just didn't seem feasible. So then we started trying to think outside the box and look at other pieces, and we came across the Outdoor Council of Canada, which has a field leader program that is about hiking, and how hiking applies to running a water polo tournament, it remains to be seen. But what it gave us was a nationally recognized certificate provided by a third party that the university would accept. And the focus of the training is on leadership. So it talks about why students are interested in leading these groups to this location and how your motivation for leadership can radically change the experience. So if my goal is to take all of you to the top of this mountain and Kirsten twists her ankle 250 meters in, I'm dragging her up there. If my goal is to get you outside and share some of the beauty of Vancouver Island, and Kirsten twists her ankle, now I'm not going to drag you to the top of the mountain. We're going to make other concessions, and we're going to look at how can we have a great experience without putting one person into peril. Now, trying to apply that has been interesting, and I've reached out to some of you in the past to try to see, is there a group from within sport clubs that would be willing to talk to the leadership team at the Outdoor Council of Canada to explore training for traditional sport? They offer an equestrian module, a paddling module, a hiking module, an overnight module, and a winter module, which could apply to any of your outdoor stuff that you're currently doing if you do it. What they don't have is anything that applies to what most of us do, which is traditional sport. So part of my, I tried to set this up for, was it November, Allison? I think it was like sometime in November, maybe it would have been October, where I'd put in
End of October.
yeah,
End of
that I
October.
was gonna, in theory, host, and then the avalanche of posts. Like, I don't know what things are like on your campus, but it's been an avalanche of fun for us at UVic. Like, people are wanting to do everything, which is awesome. The challenge has been that the amount of stuff we need to run around and check off while they try to go and do these things has gone up. So there just was no bandwidth on my part to create an opportunity for us to get together. So I can leave it at, if you're interested, send me an email at jwright@uvic.ca and I will get a group together. I've planned another time in January, late January, possibly early February with the Outdoor Council of Canada. So we get out of the second term rush, but it would be good to get people together to get a sense of, are you struggling with leadership and delivery of leadership? As in, when you have student leaders, what do they bring to the table? Like, some of us have worked with people who are unbelievably accredited, and you think, how is it possible you're 20 or 22 and you're like up here on the national standard of everything you need to know? And some of us had worked with people who are just really excited. I'm really excited. Wow, I'm so excited. I'm like, God, it's terrifying, but good. I mean, it's better than not being excited. So if there's interest, or if you have any questions you wanted to ask about the program now, I'm happy to take a couple minutes and just try to set the bar. But if you have specific interest, if you can reach out to me, I will then follow up.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. So we have about 7 minutes left. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer if anybody wants to. Is there any questions you guys want to cover? We have a couple left in the agenda, but we can leave those for another time. Is there anything you guys want to talk about? How is clubs going during COVID? Is there any issue that you're dealing with that you're like, I really need some advice? Now is your opportunity. Crickets? Awesome. Okay, then one of my, oh, go ahead, Ryan. Perfect.
I'll go. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges with COVID this fall has been all the legal stuff, all the extra documents and tracking that, and like COVID waivers, COVID consent waivers, everything. Like, these they've had to sign 5 or 6 different things just to participate. So I'm hoping, like, yeah, and we've been using Google Docs for this, Google Forms and Google Docs. Maybe this new Fusion thing will be a way to help manage that. But I've really struggled with, like, my time, so much of my time just spending going through all the students having to fill out, have they filled out all their forms and all that. Like, it's a pain in the butt. So just wondering what people have used to manage that, if there's anything different.
So I just dropped in the chat our student athlete agreement. That is the only document our athletes had to sign. Sorry, there's another one. It's a photo release one that didn't get into this document. But this one has our COVID waiver in it. They do have one other form they have to sign, which was a indication that they were gonna get vaccinated, and then provide proof of vaccination to our medical officer. Those are the only 2 COVID documents they signed. And we incorporated the COVID document directly into our athlete agreement. So they literally had, I've been tracking 2 documents per athlete, and that's just because we forgot to put the photo release in this one. So I shared it in the chat. That's what we did. And I hate tracking 2 documents. I can't imagine 5. What is everybody else doing, or has everybody else handling that?
Well, I've been lucky at Georgia. I've only had 1 sport to run, so that's because of limited. We just reopened. But what we've done is the registration form through our website through Presto. We put all those so part of the registration, the last 4 sections basically cover off COVID, general liability, and there was just a check mark that they had to agree to, or they can't participate. And then that can just get all uploaded to an Excel sheet. So really, it was just a matter of me looking at an Excel sheet, Ryan, and going, everybody's filled that out. Then, of course, because it's an off-site thing in an arena, they have to get, they were getting a double whammy. They got to check in here in Ontario and show proof of vaccination, proof of ID to get through 1 level. When they get to me for contact tracing, we have a Safe at Georgian app, which they have to show me that they're vaccinated and are symptom free. And then our game sheet just basically is a check-in to act as a contact tracing, and then they had adhered to. So it was the legwork, like you said, Ryan, of getting that done was tough, but so far on this end, it's been, and admittedly only having to deal with 80 athletes 1 night a week, it's been pretty straightforward so far. The challenge is like someone was saying, with travel, we're going to be getting pushback on some of these things just going forward, as because for our school is about 1 or 2 steps behind whatever, like Ontario's increased capacity limits to, Ryan, to anything, right? Well, capacity limits in our, there's no way we're fitting 1,600 people in our gym for an event. Our administration is not going to let it happen, right? So you get pushed back about, well, everybody can't come. Why do I got to sign up for a fitness time? Why do I have to sign up to do open gym? Why is there only 20 people out in the gym when it's a free for all? So that's become a bit of a challenge. But so if you can have something where kind of all that stuff's there, I'm happy to share what we do. Ryan, I'll send you like a copy of my form, and it's pretty basic. So, and it was vetted by our law, insurance and law people above my head. So it seems to be fine. And it's just like one-stop shopping for you, right? Because that automatically populates, and I just get an update every day as to who's registered.
At Western, we have, because all registrations are done through Fusion, we have the waiver set up there as well, and it's probably something similar to that student athlete agreement. And so you cannot actually pay your membership fee unless you sign the waiver. So if somebody declines, they just cannot pay their membership fees, which means they can't be part of the club. And we do put it on the executives. So I send a list, or I keep updating a list of the registrants who have paid on each club account. So the executives have access to that, and it's their responsibility to make sure that people that are coming in and using our facilities are on that list. And if not, first off, they need to send them off, but second, they shouldn't be letting them be part of the club or be part of that session, because technically they haven't paid fees regardless of, all the waivers and stuff. And second, we've also piggybacked on the school here at Western. I think as of October 15th, everyone on campus had to be fully vaccinated. And so through the school uploading their own proof of vaccination into a database, we're assuming that everybody who is on campus, obviously students then, are fully vaccinated. So we're sort of piggybacking on the main administrative department to sort of deal with that. And same thing at the rec center. If you don't have a membership for the rec center, you can't come in. So only those who have been fully vaccinated and been approved, say, by the university, then can only enter. And then for those who are off campus, then those off campus locations have their own protocols for whether they check every single time, or some of them I think have opted for the QR code, so that you only have to check your proof of vaccination once. You get a QR code, and then every time you show up again, you just show that QR code, you get scanned, and that's it, right? But on pretty much every count, we're covered. but that's what we've done.
I'll share my experience. So I'm way out kind of in my own little world. So my name's Chelsea. I'm currently a graduate assistant at Texas A&M University. So I'm wild in the Wild West of literally no rules. So what our university does is, because we can't really mandate anything, or we can't ask you to do a lot of things like show proof of vaccination or get tested or do anything like that, we sort of default back to the university's regulations. So you just have to follow all local, state, and federal guidelines. And so our clubs, they're allowed to travel all across the country. They're not allowed to travel internationally, but not many of them do. But wherever it is that they go, they, as part of student conduct, they have to follow whatever regulations it is in that area. So we ourselves do not mandate whatever it is that they have to do. But if they're going somewhere and they have like requirements and stuff like that, they just have to follow those. And so we've been pretty fortunate. Not a lot has like happened for us. There's been a few clubs that have gone places where they require either proof of vaccination or proof of testing. And our clubs were really well compliant with that. So that was interesting for me, because sometimes that's not. But we did have an incident where one of our clubs traveled to Florida, and one of the members would not wear a mask. So they flew there. So federal regulations require that you have to wear a mask on an airline, and she wouldn't do it. So we had to, kind of going back to how the student conduct thing works, we handled it internally, because nothing escalated past just being asked a number of times to put her mask on, which she eventually did to be able to get on the airplane. It caused some frustration within their club, so we had an internal meeting about it. But had it escalated further, it would have been something that, again, we sort of just passed off to student conduct, and wouldn't have been something that we dealt with, because then it goes, it impacts whether they actually get to stay in the university and stuff or not. But that's how we do it here, which is maybe very, very different than what you guys do in Canada. But we kind of just sort of go with whatever the federal regulations are, because we have no state regulations basically in Texas. So it's been interesting just sort of coming from the Canadian viewpoint of having so many forms of stuff, but so far it's worked for us, and we've been doing pretty well with all of those things. So I just thought I'd share my sort of left field kind of experience from everybody.
It's amazing. It's amazing. In a world of lawsuits and no forms, nothing. That's crazy to me. Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss?
How many groups have had overwhelming support for clubs, as opposed to how many of us are struggling with people coming back, or a mix between the two?
Struggling on some clubs, and some clubs thriving.
Anyone else have
Depending on
groups
the
that are
sport.
struggling?
Well, we struggle because we're not allowed to have students back on campus yet. So it's very limited. Some students are back for labs. So mostly it's international students who got here before in September that are in res. So we're not fully opening again, and we'll be at 80% capacity in January. So, that'll be interesting. That being said, when I posted for intramural ice hockey, I got 70 people signing up in 48 hours, and I was at max capacity. So there's some things that like you said, Jay, there's people want to do stuff. They just want to be allowed to do stuff. So I think January is going to be a whole cornucopia of trying to deal with whatever comes down the pike.
For our rec clubs, we've struggled with accommodating the amount of interest, right? Like just the overwhelming interest of students to get involved and do something, whether they've done it before or not.
For us, I know I can speak for rec, that it's been a struggle because students weren't on campus this semester. There was about 15% in classes this semester. We're going back to almost full capacity in January. But from my perspective on competitive clubs, it's been overwhelming. Like the only club that I've struggled with has been really cross country. They didn't have a return. They didn't have a lot of athletes return, but I'm back to over 400 athletes in my programs right now with, we started a women's rugby club team this year as well. So there's been some new ones and some ones that struggled even before the pandemic that have now come back even stronger.
I guess the other questions that I had received was, is anybody running something like disc golf, or is there been an increase in interest of disc golf on your campus? And if so, how are you handling that? Is it falling in our intramurals or clubs?
So we tried running a disc golf through our recreation programs, but we tried to just do it as like, just to gain interest and see if like we could make it an intramural sport. I don't think it ended up running, but we did have a couple people interested, but for the most part, that's all on our recreation side, not our competitive sport clubs.
Okay, then the last question I have one for myself too that I'm going to selfishly ask after, but is anybody offering mountain biking, resort skiing, hiking, whitewater kayaking, or anything like that? Clearly I live in Saskatchewan. These things don't occur in our province. If so, how are you assisting it and how are you managing risk and liability?
So we have 3 of those 4. We don't have mountain biking. That's run through the UVSS, the Student Society here. And this year, the Student Society has mandated for all of their trips, they have to buy extra insurance. So every single time they try to take someone out mountain biking, that's where they get hit with insurance. For the other 3 groups, we run them under that OCC, the Outdoor Council of Canada, and then they have to provide trip paperwork, the same as we would for any competitive team. Around safety, et cetera. And I can share that process if anyone, like whoever specifically asked the question, I'm happy to share that back. Our trip paperwork is ridiculous at this particular point in time. Like some of them are 87 pages long. So it's, I don't know how I'm not saying you want what I have, but I'm happy to share what it is.
Thanks, Jason. I actually would like to see what you guys do for trip stuff. Trying to get out of some travel, so.
I'll send you the new forms.
Yes.
It's super fun.
Awesome. So we just took on a women's flag football team, which is pretty exciting. It's growing very quickly in Saskatchewan. But their national championship set by Football Canada is in May. How does anybody have sports that compete in like the spring, summer? And if so, how do you manage eligibility? Do they have to be students fall, winter? Do they have to be full-time students in the spring, summer? Like any advice? Please help.
I can go, Allison.
Sorry.
Stephanie, you go first, Stephanie.
Just quickly, we do have a couple of teams that fall into that category, and they just have to have enough credits like during the fall, winter. They don't need to be actively enrolled in the spring or summer. So it's, I think, similar to varsity. We just go based on like the existing past year.
Awesome, thanks.
Same at Laurier, Allison. Same thing. It's rare, but the few Dragon Boat competes in the spring as well. And they it would be based on their fall, winter student eligibility.
And we have a cricket team that participates only in the spring. And then the same for us, as long as they're students prior to that. And then we've had a couple of our sport club teams that want to train over the summer. Men's and women's ultimate is a good example to beat UBC. So.
For us, I know in the past, Dragon Boat usually also competes in the summer crest. And rather than look at the student eligibility itself, I think we just said only those who had been members of the club during the fall and winter term were eligible to be members of the club for the summer and then compete in the summer. I think that's how eligibility was run instead, because we don't actually cross-reference with the actual academic eligibility and whether they can compete or not based on credit, since they're not a varsity team. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we require all of our students to be full-time students. So I was like, what do I do now? So like Football Canada has their own policy, but I know Ultimate Canada had a policy and our university said, no, we're not following that. They allow at one point, now this is dating myself, but at one point Ultimate Canada allowed 5 non-university students to play in our university. It was like, no way. So I know we've had discussions. They compete in the winter in a league in Regina. And so we're just trying to figure out who will be eligible to play in that national championship. So thank you for your feedback. I will take that up to the discussions that we're having. Does anybody else have any other questions? Anything else they want to discuss quickly here?
I kind of just want to ask a little question as well, just to follow up on the how other clubs are doing just with COVID. I currently have 3 clubs that are on hold. 2 of them I've actually found people interested to take the leadership for as an executive and try to get the club restarted in January, but I'm still having trouble with 1. Nobody has really stepped forward to lead the club, and we're getting late in the term, and nothing, I couldn't do it, but I also don't have the experience in that particular area to really help them. So I was wondering if anybody was sort of on the same boat, and whether you've either given up for the year and hopefully start planning for like next September, or how you're going about, considering last year, I'm not sure about you guys, but for us, we didn't have sport clubs running last year at all. And so there was no membership at all. Therefore, anybody interested in actually being an executive this year for those clubs were either members 2 years ago, or just happened to know somebody that were in school now and they just picked it up, kind of thing. But for those that were on hold, we're just relying on those who have an interest in the club itself and maybe have some experience, right?
Betty, we had a lot of success in doing some social media posts and reaching out to some of those communities to try to see who else, because like Western's a huge institution. So you would have students that may not have been affiliated with the club, that didn't know it was there, that suddenly see an opportunity to get involved. So our outdoor club had exactly the same problem. They did a year of nothing, and then all of the people who were in the leadership positions graduated, and there was a total leadership void. So it's been a tough go, but we spent the fall, we went from 1 person who said maybe they'd be interested in getting involved. We now have like 15 of them. So it's been a rebuilding process, but we've been actively engaged in trying to get those students connected, and then following up to see, okay, so what are you doing? Like, and it's part of it is they lose all historical perspective, right? So there's no easy turnover, because a lot of our clubs just rinse and repeat. It's like whatever we did last year, we're doing this year. So trying to assure them that you don't have to do what was there before. I can tell you what we have been doing. Here are some other pieces that we can do, and connecting them with past execs so that there's a couple of different people, but that's been successful in finding people to fill positions. What it hasn't translated to just yet is a ton of activity. And I'm not pushing that just because of the paperwork involved. And like, I'm okay with them getting their feet under them and then figuring out how they're going to move forward. So depending on the group, that might work.
Thanks, Jason.
I was just going to add a little bit there. Sometimes you do have to let them go. I did mention Dragon Boat, but our Dragon Boat Club is no longer in existence. There is so much, there's so much administration that, when you have 20, 23 clubs underneath you, if there's no strong student leadership, often you have to let the cycles take their course, and clubs will come and go over the years. So it is challenging, but you can do a little recruitment, but you have to be careful about what you put yourself in the position for taking on moving forward if no one steps into the role.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Sarah. And quite frankly, like, I'd be okay letting them go maybe next year if nobody else steps up, but just not really having a chance after COVID. I kind of wanted to give them this year at least to see if somebody else will pick it up, but totally understand. And it also depends on the club, right? Like you mentioned, so much administrative work has to go on under some of those clubs, which really makes it hard for somebody having already 23 clubs or a number around that to focus on that one and to take it out of the water, right? Sorry, just one more quick follow-up question that I just thought of, Jason. Do you have a specific social media account that is specific for sport clubs, or do you go out on your like varsity social media or anything like that?
A rec club, and then all of the clubs have their own social media accounts. So we've been trying to explain to them that everyone who's following them on their own social media accounts is already drinking the Kool-Aid, and so we don't need to get back to that group. But we have been successful in putting it out on some of our social media channels. And then word of mouth, right? Word of mouth is probably the best way to connect people. So what I did at the beginning part, Sarah, like Outdoors Club's been around campus since the 60s. So I didn't want it to die. Whereas Quidditch was a sport I didn't understand, and tackle sports between Taylor and I didn't seem like a long-term sustainable thing for either of us. So Quidditch going was okay. But for the Outdoors Club, it was worth the investment to try to figure out, how do we bring people back? How do we engage? And how do we put some leadership in place? So I did take and make some extra time for them. And it didn't take a ton of work, right? It probably took a few touches to get 1 or 2 students that were really keen, And once you have that person who's a connector, just to get them to bring people to the table, and then your job is to explain, here's what it looks like. And for us, it's the process that scares people away. So part of that, the training requirements and other pieces were the stumbling blocks, but it's been worthwhile. So depending on the sport, I don't know that it would be too difficult to just at least take a shot at it, right? Before you say, let it go.
We also let our club sit in a hiatus status for 5 years. So I have a couple clubs that have been away for 3 years now, 2 years for one, and this past year for the other. And they have money in an account. So we're going to hold that money for them for 5 years. And if somebody comes back, then they have a fund to start with versus starting from scratch. One of our accounts has over $75,000. So when I go say to the Constitution, like, I don't know what to do with this money if they don't ever come back. And that's one of the clubs I don't think will ever come back. So then their Constitution basically says, we don't know what to do with this money. So I don't know what to do with that money at the end of it. So we're going to figure that out, I guess, in 2 years' time when they don't return. But some of the clubs, I do the same thing. If they've been around a long time, we really work with, we actually work with the sport governing body and reach out to them to see if they have any athletes in that system that are university students that would be interested in being a part of the club, and having them reach out on our behalf. And we also go through them for coaching advice as well. So when we go to hire a coach now, we actually contact the sport governing body and get their approval, just because they know their coaches better than we do in any given sport. And so that's been really helpful for us as well. Anyone else? Any other questions before we say goodbye? I just want to thank everybody for attending. Really appreciate the feedback. I think it's really a great opportunity for us to get together and share ideas and just touch base and see what everybody else does and how our programs differ, but also how very similar they are. If you want to do a roundtable, or if you're like, hey, you know what, I have a bunch of questions, is there one coming up? Don't hesitate to reach out to Jason and I. We're always willing to set something like this up. It's pretty easy. I can do it through NIRSA and then just get the word out, but also it's easy to just send it out on that Sierra listserv as well. So if there's ever anything you want, and it doesn't have to be sport club related, I know some of us wear many hats, but please feel free to reach out to me or Jason or any of the leadership team, Canadian leadership team that's on the NIRSA board. If there's something you want us to grab a bunch of people together and talk, I think that's the beauty of the profession we work in, is we're always willing to share ideas and learn from each other. Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate you joining us so much. Bye.
Thanks, Allison. Great job.
Thanks, Jason, for jumping in.
Thanks, guys. Take care.